Lysara Greythorn hovered just above the earth, her silver-white hair lifting as if pulled by unseen forces. Golden runes spiraled around her body, glowing brighter with every heartbeat, ancient, forbidden symbols that hadn't been seen in centuries. Power poured from her chest like liquid light, feeding the ground beneath her. And then, the forest breathed. Roots cracked through the soil. Leaves burst into existence. The air itself trembled. Behind her, the mist parted. Slowly, deliberately, a colossal white wolf stepped forward. His eyes burned with ancient intelligence. His presence alone silenced the world. Not a beast. A king. Thalric Wildbane. And the glowing magic circling her body reached for him, connected to him, as if it had always belonged to him. As if she had always belonged to him. The courtyard fell silent the moment Lysara stepped forward. Not the respectful silence of a Luna entering her place, but the cold, cutting stillness of judgment already past. Dozens of wolves stood in a circle beneath the pale morning sky, their eyes fixed on her. Some looked away in discomfort. Others didn't bother hiding their disdain. At the center stood the Alpha. And beside him, the woman who had taken everything from her. Lysara's fingers trembled at her sides, though her face remained still. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not here. Not in front of all of them. You stand accused, the Alpha's voice rang out, sharp and merciless, of weakening this pack, of bringing misfortune, of failing your role as Luna. Each word struck like a blow, but none as deeply as the silence that followed. No one spoke for her. Not a single voice rose in her defense. Her gaze flickered across the crowd, faces she had protected, fought for, bled for. They couldn't even meet her eyes now. Cowards. I have done nothing but serve this pack, she said, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her. If there is weakness here, it is not mine. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but it died quickly under the Alpha's glare. You dare speak back? He stepped forward, his presence heavy, suffocating. You, who cannot even command the respect of your own wolves. Lysara's jaw tightened. She felt it then, that familiar, hollow ache in her chest. The one that whispered all the things they believed about her. Unworthy. Broken. Cursed. The woman beside him smirked faintly, her hand resting possessively on the Alpha's arm. That gesture alone said everything. Replacement. Final. You are no longer Luna, the Alpha declared. From this moment on, you are nothing. The words echoed louder than any roar. Something inside Lysara cracked, but she refused to let it show. And what would you have me be? She asked quietly. His expression didn't change. Gone. A guard stepped forward, tossing a small, worn cloak at her feet. Take it, he said. It's more than you deserve. For a moment, Lysara didn't move. The world around her blurred, not from tears, but from the sheer weight of it all collapsing at once. Everything she had been, erased with a sentence. Slowly, she bent and picked up the cloak. It was rough, plain, nothing like what a Luna would wear. Fitting. Without another word, she turned her back on them. No one stopped her. No one called her name. The gates of the pack loomed ahead, towering and final. With each step, the bond she had once felt, the connection to her people, her home, faded into nothing. By the time she crossed the threshold, it was gone. The forest stretched before her, dark and endless. The dead forest. A place whispered about in fear. A place no wolf entered and returned from. Perfect. Lysara paused only once, just beyond the gates. Not to look back. Never that. But to steady the storm inside her. They were wrong, she whispered, not with certainty, but with desperate defiance. Then, pulling the cloak tighter around her shoulders, she stepped forward and disappeared into the darkness. The moment Lysara crossed the boundary, the world changed. It wasn't sudden. Not a crash, not a roar. A silence. The kind that pressed against her ears until even her own breathing felt too loud. Behind her, the distant sounds of the pack faded completely, as if they had never existed at all. No voices. No footsteps. No life. Only the forest. She moved forward slowly, her boots sinking into damp, dark earth. The air was colder here, heavier. It clung to her skin, slipped beneath her cloak, wrapped around her like something watching, waiting. The trees rose high above her, their branches twisted and bare, clawing at the pale sky. No leaves, no birds, no wind. Dead. Just as they had said. Lysara tightened her grip on the cloak around her shoulders, her jaw set. Good. Let it be dead. Let it swallow her whole. At least here. No one would look at her like she was nothing. Another step. Then another. The deeper she walked, the more the silence shifted. Not broken. Changed. There was a rhythm to it now. Faint, almost imperceptible. Like something breathing just beneath the surface of the earth. She stopped. Her gaze flickered around her. Sharp, alert. Enough, she muttered under her breath. I won't be afraid of shadows. But even as she said it, her pulse quickened. Because this didn't feel like shadows. It felt like presence. Watching. Measuring. Waiting. A branch cracked somewhere behind her. Lysara turned instantly, but there was nothing there. Only fog curling low along the forest floor. Her chest rose and fell slowly as she steadied herself. If something is here, she said, her voice cutting through the stillness. Then come out. The words echoed. Then vanished. No answer. No movement. Nothing. And yet, the feeling didn't leave. If anything, it deepened. She exhaled sharply and forced herself to keep moving. Standing still would only feed the unease crawling under her skin. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time felt strange here, stretched thin and uncertain. The ground beneath her boots grew softer, almost fragile. Dark roots twisted across her path like veins, pulsing faintly beneath the surface. That rhythm again. Closer now. Her step slowed. Without thinking, she lowered herself slightly, brushing her fingers against the earth. Cold, but not lifeless. Her breath caught. For a brief, impossible moment. She felt something answer her touch. A flicker. A pulse. Then it was gone. Lysara jerked her hand back, her heart pounding. No, she whispered, shaking her head. That's not possible. This place was dead. It had to be. And yet the deeper she walked, the more the forest seemed to close in, not in hostility, but in awareness. The fog thickened, curling around her legs, trailing behind her like silent footsteps. The trees no longer felt empty. They felt attentive, as if every step she took was being noticed. Judged. Wait. A sudden gust of wind swept through the forest, sharp and cold, and for the first time, the branches above her shifted. Not wildly, not violently, just enough to whisper. A sound so faint it barely existed. But Lysara heard it, felt it. A breath. Her breath caught as she lifted her gaze slowly. This forest, she murmured, her voice barely more than a whisper. Her eyes narrowed, something new flickering behind them, uncertainty, and something dangerously close to realization. And it's not dead. The whisper didn't fade. It lingered. Soft, low, almost fragile. Lysara stood perfectly still, her breath shallow, her senses straining against the silence that was no longer truly silent. The forest had changed. She could feel it now, not as emptiness, but as something holding itself back. Watching her, waiting for something. For what? She murmured, her voice barely steady. No answer came, but the ground beneath her feet trembled. It was faint, so slight most wouldn't have noticed. But she did. Her body stilled, every instinct sharpening as she slowly lowered her gaze. The dark soil pulsed. Once, then again. A subtle rhythm, like a heartbeat buried deep beneath layers of decay. Lysara's breath caught in her throat. No, she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. That's not possible. This place was dead. It had to be. And yet the pulse came again, stronger this time. Her chest tightened as something inside her responded. Not fear. Recognition. Her fingers curled slowly at her sides as that same strange energy stirred within her chest, faint at first. Then growing, warming, spreading through her veins like liquid fire. The forest pulsed. Her heart answered. Once. Twice. The rhythm aligned. Lysara staggered back a step, shaking her head as if she could force it away. Stop. I don't. The words broke as the energy surged. A sharp breath tore from her lungs as light flickered beneath her skin, golden glowing, threading through her like veins of fire. The air shifted. The fog recoiled, and the ground beneath her feet cracked open with a low, echoing sound. Roots pushed through the soil, twisting upward, alive with movement. Not violent, not uncontrolled. Awakening. Lysara's eyes widened as she stared at her hands. The glow intensified, spilling from her fingertips in faint, shimmering strands. No, this isn't me, she said, but the denial felt weak, fragile against the undeniable truth rising around her. The pulse came again. Stronger. This time, it didn't stay beneath the ground. It spread. Outward. Through the trees. Through the air. Through her. Her knees buckled slightly as the energy surged again, forcing her to inhale sharply. The world around her blurred, not fading, but sharpening in a way that made everything feel too real. She could feel it now. Everything. The roots beneath her feet. The brittle bark of the trees. The faint traces of life buried deep beneath layers of death. It wasn't gone. It had never been gone. It had been waiting. For her. Lysara's chest rose and fell rapidly as panic clawed at her control. I don't want this, she whispered, her voice trembling despite the power growing inside her. I don't. The ground answered her. Another pulse. Stronger than before. And this time, it didn't stop. Light burst outward from her feet in a sudden wave, racing across the forest floor. The cracks widened, glowing faintly as the energy spread, touching everything in its path. The trees shuddered, branches trembled, and for the first time, a single leaf unfurled. Lysara's breath hitched as she stared at it, her fear momentarily forgotten. Green. Alive. Impossible. The glow around her flickered, unstable now, rising and falling with the rhythm she could no longer control. I didn't. She whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't do this. But even as she said it, she knew. The forest wasn't just reacting. It was answering. And whatever had begun, it wasn't going to stop. The pulse didn't slow. It grew. What began as a trembling beneath Lysara's feet surged into something vast, something ancient, and it rushed through her like a force that had finally found its way home. Her breath shattered into sharp gasps as the light within her blazed brighter, no longer hidden beneath her skin. It broke free. Gold. Blinding. Burning. Alive. It poured from her chest in radiant streams, wrapping around her body in spiraling bands. Symbols ignited within the light, ancient runes, shifting and turning, their meaning just beyond her grasp yet painfully familiar. Lysara staggered, her boots lifting from the ground as the force carried her upward. No, wait. Her voice broke, but the power didn't listen. It answered only itself. Her body rose fully into the air, suspended in the center of the forest as the glowing runes circled her faster, tighter, forming a living cage of light. Her silver-white hair lifted with it, flowing wildly as if caught in a storm that did not touch the world around her. The forest reacted instantly. The pulse exploded outward. Roots tore through the earth, no longer creeping but surging, twisting up from the ground with purpose. The cracked soil glowed beneath them, veins of gold racing through the darkness. The trees shuddered, then changed. Branches stretched, bark mended, and brittle limbs thickened with sudden strength. Leaves burst forth, not slowly, not gently, but in a rapid bloom of green that spread like wildfire through the forest canopy. Life. Unstoppable. Lysara's eyes snapped open, and they were no longer the same. The faint glow had become something deeper, brighter. Her gaze burned with silver-gold light, wide with shock as the power surged again, forcing a cry from her throat. I can't control this. She gasped, her hands clenching as the energy lashed outward in response. The runes spun faster. The air trembled, and the forest answered her panic with more power. A wave of light erupted from her, rippling through the trees, igniting everything it touched. The fog scattered violently, torn apart by the force of something no longer dormant. Something awake. No, no, stop. Her voice cracked, desperation threading through it now. Please. But the power wasn't cruel. It wasn't wild. It was overwhelming. Ancient. And it knew her. The lights surged again, but this time, it shifted. Instead of bursting outward in chaos, it drew inward, toward her core. The runes slowed, their movement becoming deliberate, controlled, as if responding to something deeper than her fear. Her breathing hitched. The force didn't fade. It settled, flowing through her instead of against her. Lysara hovered there, trembling, her chest rising and falling as the golden light softened into a steady glow around her body. The runes continued to orbit her, slower now, quieter, but no less powerful. Below her, the forest stood transformed. No longer dead. No longer silent. Alive. Her gaze dropped to the ground, taking in the impossible sight. Green spreading in every direction, roots anchored deep and strong. The air no longer heavy but breathing with quiet energy. Her voice faltered, barely a whisper now. What have I done? The question hung in the air, unanswered. But the forest itself seemed to stir, as if the answer was already written into its roots. And far beyond her sight, something ancient had felt it, awakened by the same light now burning within her. The light faded, but not completely. It settled into her skin, into her breath, into the steady rhythm of her heart. Lysara's feet touched the ground slowly, as though the forest itself was reluctant to let her go. For a moment, there was only silence again, but it was no longer empty. It was full, alive in a way that made her pulse echo in her ears. Lysara stood there, trembling, her gaze fixed on the world she had changed. Green stretched where death had ruled. Leaves whispered softly above her, catching a wind that hadn't existed minutes before. I did this, she whispered, though the words felt unreal. Impossible. A low sound rolled through the forest. Not loud, not sharp, but deep, ancient. It didn't come from the trees. It came from beyond them. Lysara stilled. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up, every instinct tightening, every sense sharpening as the air shifted again. The mist thickened. It crept across the ground, slow and deliberate, curling between the roots and rising in soft spirals around her legs. The newly grown leaves above stilled, as if the entire forest had suddenly chosen to hold its breath. Watching. Waiting. The sound came again. Closer now. A heavy step. Then another. Not hurried. Not hunting. Measured. Lysara's heart began to pound, her fingers curling slightly at her sides as she forced herself not to move. Who's there? She called, her voice steady, but only just. No answer. Only the mist parting. At first, she saw nothing but shifting white, then a shape began to form within it. Massive. Far too large to be any ordinary wolf. Her breath caught. A paw stepped forward, silent against the earth. Then another. The mist peeled away slowly, reluctantly, revealing more of the figure with each step. White. Not pale. Not dull. Pure. His fur seemed to carry its own light, soft yet undeniable, glowing faintly against the dim forest. Muscles moved beneath it with quiet strength, each motion controlled, deliberate. And then, his eyes. They found her instantly. Sharp. Piercing. Ancient. Lysara froze under that gaze. It wasn't the look of a predator sizing up prey. It was something far worse. Recognition. The enormous wolf stepped fully into the clearing, towering over everything around him. The forest seemed to bend subtly to his presence, not out of fear, but out of something deeper. Respect. No. Authority. The air grew heavier, charged in a way that made her breath shallow. Every instinct told her to bow, to submit, to run. But she didn't. She couldn't. Because something inside her, something that had awakened with the forest, refused. The wolf stopped a few paces away, his gaze never leaving hers. The world fell completely silent. No wind. No movement. Just the two of them, suspended in a moment that felt far too large for time to hold. Lysara swallowed, her voice barely more than a breath. What are you? The wolf didn't answer, but the air between them shifted. The faint golden glow beneath her skin stirred, and then reached. Slowly, unbidden, a thin strand of light slipped from her chest, drifting forward through the stillness. Toward him. The moment it touched the space between them, his eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in something deeper. Something that made her chest tighten. The light connected, and the world seemed to exhale. Lysara's breath hitched as a sudden, overwhelming presence flooded her senses, not invading, not forcing, but existing. Ancient. Endless. Power beyond anything she had ever known. And beneath it all, a single, undeniable truth. Not a question. Not a doubt. A recognition that settled into her very core. He knew her. The massive wolf took one final step forward, closing the distance just enough to make the bond between them burn brighter. And though he still hadn't spoken, she felt it. Felt the weight of his name settle into her mind like something carved into stone. Thalric, the original Alpha King. And he was looking at her. Not as an intruder. Not as an accident. But as if she was exactly where she was meant to be. The moment the light touched him, it changed. What had been a single, fragile thread between them deepened, thickened, turning from a flicker into a living bond. Lysara gasped as the golden strand pulsed, no longer drifting aimlessly but anchoring itself between her chest and the massive white wolf before her. Thalric did not move. Yet the air around him shifted, bending subtly as if the world itself recognized his presence, and the connection forming in his name. The glow intensified. It wrapped around her first. Bands of golden runes reappeared, circling her body in slow, deliberate orbits. They no longer spun wildly. They moved with purpose, responding to something beyond her control. Or perhaps, something beyond her fear. Her breath came uneven as she felt it, truly felt it this time. Not just power. Him. A presence vast and ancient brushed against her mind, not forcing entry, not demanding, but existing with such overwhelming certainty that it filled the space around her thoughts. Lysara staggered slightly, her hand rising instinctively to her chest as the bond tightened. What is this? She whispered, her voice trembling. The answer didn't come in words. It came in sensation. In memory that wasn't hers. In a pulse that echoed far older than her own heartbeat. The forest stirred in response. Leaves rustled softly. The ground beneath her feet hummed, alive and aware, as though recognizing the union forming at its center. The golden strand between them flared suddenly, and then split. Dozens of thinner threads branched out, weaving around Thalric's massive form, tracing the lines of his body before returning to her, looping, connecting, binding. Not a leash. Not control. A link. Equal. Lysara's breath hitched sharply as the realization struck her. This isn't. She shook her head, panic flickering beneath her voice. This is impossible. But the bond answered her doubt with truth. A surge of power rushed through it, swift, overwhelming, flooding her senses with something that was not entirely her own. Strength. Calm. Dominance so absolute it didn't need to prove itself. Her knees nearly buckled under it. It wasn't just his power reaching her. It was his nature. And it recognized her. Her eyes snapped to his, wide with something deeper than fear now. Understanding. You chose me, she breathed, though the words felt too small for what she was experiencing. Thalric's gaze did not soften. It didn't need to. There was no hesitation in him. No doubt. The bond pulsed again, stronger, brighter, and this time, something within her answered willingly. The resistance she had clung to, the fear, the denial cracked. Not completely, but enough. The runes around her shifted, their glow stabilizing as the wild surges of energy began to settle into a steady, controlled flow. The forest responded instantly. The restless hum quieted. The air steadied. Everything aligned. Lysara inhaled sharply, her body trembling as the overwhelming force finally balanced. Not gone. never gone, but no longer consuming her. The golden threads between them softened, their light dimming slightly, but the connection remained, steady and unbreakable. She could feel him. Always. Not controlling her. Not claiming her. But there. Watching. Waiting. A presence at her side even in stillness. Lysara lowered her hand slowly, her breathing uneven but steadier now. Her gaze never left his. "This doesn't make sense," she said quietly. But deep down, beneath the confusion and fear, it did. In a way she couldn't explain. The bond pulsed once more, gentle now. The bond pulsed once, gentle now, steady as breath. And then, it tightened. Not painfully, not violently, but with a sudden, unmistakable urgency that sent a sharp chill through Lysara's spine. She inhaled sharply, her gaze snapping toward the edge of the forest. Something had changed. The air shifted first, subtle but wrong. The steady rhythm of the forest faltered, its quiet harmony disrupted by something foreign. Something hostile. Thalric stilled. Every line of his massive form sharpened, his presence deepening into something colder, more focused. His eyes turned, not with curiosity, but with certainty. He had already sensed it. Lysara's heart began to pound. "What is it?" she asked, though part of her already knew. The bond answered. Not in words. In instinct. In recognition. Wolves. More than one. Closing in. Her breath caught as a distant sound broke through the trees, the snap of a branch, quickly followed by another. Heavy footsteps. Careless. Confident. They weren't hiding. They were hunting. Her stomach twisted. "No," she whispered, shaking her head as the truth settled heavily into her chest. They wouldn't. But they would. Of course they would. They had cast her out to die. Now they had come to make sure she had. The forest reacted immediately. The wind shifted, low and warning. Leaves trembled, branches creaking as the living woods seemed to recoil from the approaching presence. Not fear. Rejection. Lysara's fingers curled at her sides, her pulse racing as the bond flared slightly, her power stirring in response to the threat. "I don't want to fight them," she said, her voice tight, almost pleading. Another crack echoed, closer now. A voice followed. Spread out. Cold. Familiar. Her chest tightened. They couldn't have gotten far. The Alpha wants proof. Lysara's breath hitched. Proof. Not capture. Not mercy. A slow, burning anger began to rise beneath her fear, curling through her veins like something newly awakened. "They're really going to kill me," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Thalric did not move. But the air around him changed again, deepening, darkening, as something ancient stirred beneath his calm exterior. Protective. Not possessive. Decisive. The bond pulsed once more, stronger this time, and Lysara felt it, his awareness, his focus locking onto the approaching threat with absolute clarity. A warning. Or perhaps a promise. More voices filtered through the trees now, closer with every second. "I found tracks. They lead deeper in. Keep moving." Lysara stepped back instinctively, her gaze darting between the shadows as shapes began to move within them. Familiar figures slipping through the trees, their eyes sharp, their posture tense. Hunters. Her former pack. The same wolves who had stood in silence as she was cast out. Now they looked at her like prey. Her chest rose and fell rapidly as something inside her twisted. Furious. But something else too. Something harder. They saw her. One of them froze, eyes widening slightly before narrowing. "She's alive." The words cut through the forest like a blade. More heads turned. More eyes locked onto her. For a single heartbeat, everything stood still. Then, "Take her." The command snapped through the air. And the forest itself seemed to tense. Lysara didn't move. Not yet. Her heart thundered in her chest, her breath uneven as the golden energy beneath her skin flickered, responding to the rising tension. Behind her, Thalric stepped forward. Not rushing. Not lunging. Just one step. And the ground seemed to remember what he was. The hunters hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. Lysara felt it, the shift, the balance tipping, the moment stretching thin between what she had been and what she could become. Her fingers curled slowly, the glow beneath her skin beginning to rise again. They had come to erase her. But this time, she wasn't alone. They moved first. Not her. The hunters lunged through the trees with practiced precision, claws ready, eyes locked on her like she was nothing more than a target to be finished. Don't let her escape. The command snapped, and something inside Lysara broke. The fear, the anger, the betrayal. It all surged at once. Her breath caught as the golden energy beneath her skin flared violently, no longer a steady glow but a raging force clawing its way free. I said stop, she shouted, her voice cracking as she threw her hand forward instinctively. The forest answered. Not gently. The ground erupted. Roots tore upward in a violent wave, slamming into the advancing wolves and throwing them back with crushing force. The impact echoed through the trees, followed by sharp cries of pain as bodies hit the earth. But it didn't stop. It didn't listen. Lysara's eyes widened in horror as the power kept rising, feeding on her spiraling emotions. The runes around her flared back to life, spinning faster, brighter, no longer controlled. No, that's enough. She gasped, staggering back as another surge ripped through her. The trees shook violently. Branches snapped. The newly grown life twisted under the strain, bending unnaturally as the energy flooded through everything at once. She couldn't separate it. The forest, the power, herself. It was all blending together. Get up. One of the hunters snarled from the ground. She's unstable, strike now. More movement. More aggression. More threat. And the power answered again. A blinding flash of gold burst outward from her body, slamming into everything in its path. The air itself seemed to tear under the force, sending another wave crashing through the forest. This time, it wasn't just the hunters who suffered. The trees groaned. The ground cracked deeper. The very life she had restored began to strain against the overwhelming surge. Lysara choked on a breath, her hands clutching her head as the energy spiraled out of control. Stop, please, just stop, she cried, her voice breaking under the weight of it. But it wasn't stopping. It was growing, feeding on every ounce of fear and panic she couldn't contain. Her knees buckled as the world around her blurred, the golden light consuming her vision. She couldn't tell where she ended and the forest began anymore. It was too much. Too strong. Too vast. I can't. The words tore from her as her control shattered further. I can't hold it. Another pulse. Stronger. Wilder. The ground split open beneath her feet, glowing cracks spreading in all directions as the forest trembled violently. The hunters hesitated now, not out of mercy, but fear. She's going to destroy everything. One of them shouted. They were right. Lysara felt it. The truth hit her like a blade to the chest. This power, it wasn't just defending her. It was consuming everything around her. I'm going to kill them, she whispered, her voice hollow with realization. I'm going to destroy all of it. Her breathing broke into uneven gasps as tears blurred her vision. This was what they had said she was. Dangerous. Unstable. Cursed. And they were right. The energy surged again, rising to a breaking point. Her body trembled violently, barely holding together under the strain as the light threatened to erupt completely. Then, a presence cut through it. Not force, not resistance, but something deeper. Steady, unyielding, ancient. The bond. It pulsed. Once. And the chaos faltered. Just enough for her to feel it. Him. Not overpowering her. Not taking control. But there. Grounded. Certain. A silent anchor in the storm threatening to tear her apart. Lysara gasped, her hands dropping slightly as the overwhelming surge hesitated. Her vision flickered, and through the blinding gold, she saw him. Thalric. Standing firm. Unshaken. Watching her, not with fear, but with absolute certainty. As if he already knew. She wouldn't fall. Not if she chose not to. The power roared inside her again, pushing harder, demanding release. But now, there was something else pushing back. Not him. Her. For the first time since it began, Lysara drew in a shaking breath and didn't let it break. Her voice trembled, fragile but fighting. I won't lose this. The forest trembled around her. The power surged again. And this time, she didn't run from it. The power surged again. But this time, Lysara didn't fight it. She stood in the center of the storm, breathing through it, feeling it, letting it burn without letting it consume. Her chest rose slowly, then fell. The chaos didn't vanish. It answered. The wild, violent pulses that had torn through the forest began to shift, their rhythm no longer erratic but guided, pulled into something steadier, something shaped by her will instead of her fear. I won't lose this. She whispered again, softer now, but stronger. The golden light flared around her, but it no longer lashed outward blindly. It curved, spiraled, obeyed. The runes slowed, aligned. Her trembling stilled. Across the clearing, the hunters hesitated, their earlier confidence gone. They watched her now with something raw in their eyes. Fear. She's controlling it. One of them muttered, barely audible. Lysara lifted her head. Her eyes burned, not with panic now, but with something deeper. Sharper. The silver-gold glow had steadied, focused into a gaze that no longer searched for approval. It commanded. The forest responded instantly. The cracked ground sealed beneath her feet. The roots that had surged wildly now coiled with precision, rising only where she allowed them. The trembling trees steadied, their leaves whispering, not in distress, but in quiet acknowledgement. She could feel it all. Every root, every branch, every pulse of life she had awakened. And for the first time, it didn't overwhelm her. It listened. A slow breath left her lips as her shoulders straightened. The weight of their stares, the pack that had cast her out, that had called her nothing, no longer pressed her down. It meant nothing. You came here to finish what you started, she said, her voice calm, carrying effortlessly through the clearing. No one answered. No one moved. But you're too late. The words didn't rise. They settled. Heavy. Certain. Final. A hunter stepped forward despite it, baring his teeth in a desperate attempt to reclaim control. You're still nothing, he growled. Accursed. He didn't finish. Lysara didn't raise her voice. She didn't even move. But the forest did. A root snapped upward in a blur, stopping just short of his throat, close enough that the force of it sent him stumbling back, his words dying instantly. Silence fell again. Complete. Absolute. Lysara's gaze swept over them, steady and unyielding. The doubt that had once lived in her chest, the quiet, poisonous voice that had told her she was unworthy, was gone, burned away. I am not what you made me, she said quietly. The golden light around her pulsed once, deep, resonant. I am what I choose to become. Behind her, the air shifted. A presence stepped forward. Thalric. He didn't need to growl. He didn't need to move quickly. He simply stood at her side, and the world ad just around him. The hunters felt it. They stepped back instinctively, their instincts screaming what their pride refused to accept. This was no longer a hunt. This was judgment. The bond between Lysara and Thalric flared. Not wild, not consuming, but complete. Balanced. Unbreakable. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She could feel him. Steady. Certain. Equal. Her chin lifted slightly as her voice cut through the silence one final time. Leave. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a warning. It was a command. The forest echoed it, low, resonant, alive. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then one stepped back. Then another. And just like that, they broke. Retreating into the trees, their presence fading quickly, leaving behind only the echo of what they had witnessed and the certainty that nothing would ever be the same. Lysara stood there long after they were gone, the golden light slowly dimming to a quiet glow beneath her skin. The forest breathed with her. Alive. Whole. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, steadying herself, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of what she had become. When she opened them again, there was no hesitation left. Only quiet, undeniable power. The outcast Luna was gone, and in her place, something far greater had risen.